Hey guys, tonight we slip out of your world and into the warm, dusty air of ancient Egypt, where the sky glows gold over the Nile and sand sneaks into your sandals like it's trying to pickpocket your toes. You stand on the edge of a village, somewhere near Thebes, staring at a group of royal officials who have just pointed at you. Not your friend, not your neighbour, you. And that finger means your life is about to get very, very different. You've been chosen, not for the army, not to build a pyramid, not to go fishing for sacred catfish in a reed canoe. You're going to the palace. You're going to be a servant, but not just any servant. You'll be trained to serve Pharaoh himself, specifically to hold the most important cup in Egypt, the one that touches divine lips, the one that might be filled with wine or with poison. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, comment below with your city and what time it is where you're watching from. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The journey starts with dust in your nose and the unblinking stare of the palace scout. He's flanked by two broad-shouldered guards who smell like myrrh and really bad decisions. You've heard rumours. Every village has. Sometimes the palace comes looking for boys who are loyal and quiet. Sometimes they want strong arms for heavy things. But this time, they ask your mother if she minds you leaving. She says no, or maybe she says yes. It's hard to tell because she immediately bursts into tears, throws bread at the scout, then hugs you so tight your ribs creak, and then you're walking. The path to the capital is long, dusty, and full of things your village never prepared you for, like the terrifying grandeur of the palace gates, 3 times the height of anything you've ever seen, carved with images of gods and lions and, confusingly, a man punching a hippopotamus. The guards here wear headdresses so stiff it looks like they might crack if they blink, and when you step inside, the air changes, cooler, heavier, perfumed with lotus, garlic, and nervous sweat. You meet the overseer of cupbearers. He has one eyebrow, total, and a permanent squint like he's trying to decide if you're a cup or a roach. You'll begin training tomorrow, he says. Try not to touch anything, especially Pharaoh. And then you're shown your sleeping mat. It's next to the kitchen, meaning your dreams will now include loud snoring and the occasional flying ladle. Still, you're lucky. You haven't been sent to dig canals or quarry limestone. You're going to be part of something bigger than yourself, something divine. Pharaoh isn't just a man after all. He's a living god, which, you think as you lie awake listening to the wheeze of a baker with sleep apnea, is probably why everyone's so tense. The next morning, training begins. The head cupbearer's assistant, a weasel-faced man named Bebby, lines you and 4 other boys up in a row. Raise your hands, he says. Now hold this. He slaps a cup into your hand. It's heavier than it looks, probably made of lapis lazuli and pure anxiety. Now pretend someone's trying to kill you. You blink. That's what this job is, Bebby says. It's pretending you're calm while everyone might be trying to murder your boss. Smile and sniff the wine. And just like that, your education begins. You learn to walk smoothly, never sloshing, to sniff the bitterness, not just in the drink, but in the eyes of whoever poured it, to test for poison without actually drinking anything yourself. Spoiler, this involves watching certain bugs. If the flies die, you don't drink it. One day you watch a senior cupbearer faint after a tasting. Turned out he just skipped breakfast. But for a terrifying moment, the kitchen goes silent. The guards reach for their weapons. Someone screams, "Assassins!" and a pot of lentils is tragically sacrificed to the floor. From that day on, your fingers never stop trembling, but you keep holding that cup. You also learn palace etiquette. You bow more than you breathe. You don't speak unless spoken to. And you definitely don't laugh when you see the royal cat being carried on a litter with its own parasol. You're given a linen kilt, bleached until it's almost blinding. You're oiled so frequently you could probably slide down a pyramid face first. And you're taught the cupbearer's walk, a slow, deliberate shuffle designed to show absolute reverence and, more importantly, prevent spills. You see Pharaoh, for the first time, during a ritual. He stands on a golden platform, arms raised, head crowned with both cobra and vulture symbols. He's radiant, impossibly tall, probably wearing sandals more expensive than your entire village's annual grain output. When you glimpse him, your knees actually forget how to function. Bebby elbows you before you collapse. "Don't faint near the cup," he hisses. And so your days stretch into a blur of polishing, pouring, bowing, and pretending you're not utterly terrified. Your nights are spent whispering with the other trainees about the weird things you've seen, like the noble who smeared herself with crocodile dung as sun protection. Historians still argue whether that was common practice or just one noble's enthusiastic mistake. You miss your village, the dirt under your nails, the freedom of scratching your nose whenever you wanted. But slowly, the palace becomes your world. Its rhythms shape you. You dream of wine, of silent corridors, of footsteps behind you. And above all, you dream of not messing up. Because one mistake in this job, you probably won't survive it. Still, you're here. You're learning. You're surviving. And somehow, you're starting to belong. You're up before Ra even yawns. The courtyard is still wrapped in shadow, the kind that hugs your ankles and clings to your breath like morning dew. Today, you're going to learn how to not get Pharaoh killed, or yourself, for that matter. It starts, surprisingly, with onions. Bebby gestures at a table full of ingredients. Wine jars, dried herbs, strange pastes that smell like old boots left in the sun. "These are your new enemies," he declares dramatically, stabbing a finger at a small jar. Henbane, few drops and Pharaoh's talking to gods he wasn't scheduled to meet. This is the Royal Poison Training Program, a crash course in surviving long enough to serve a drink. You learn to identify deadly herbs by smell, by texture, by how they make a pigeon react when slipped into its water bowl. Don't worry, the pigeons are retired messenger birds. The palace is generous in ways that are sometimes deeply uncomfortable. Your lessons are hands-on. You're taught to stir wine clockwise, never counterclockwise, unless you want rumours that you worship a snake god. You're shown how to seal a cup with wax to prevent tampering, then how to check for invisible breaches. And, most importantly, you learn how to taste without tasting. This involves something called the threefold test. First, the sniff, for anything sour, metallic, or suspiciously almondy. Next, the swirl, watching for odd textures, sediment or magical glitter, not a joke. Someone once tried to curse a drink with powdered obsidian and glow beetle shells. Last, the touch. A drop on your wrist or tongue, but only after a second servant has done it first. You glance nervously at the servant whose job it is to be the first drop guy. He looks back at you with the weary expression of someone who's already made peace with several gods. The paranoia is relentless. You start checking your own water. You twitch every time someone offers you bread. Once, during your shift, a noble sneezes unexpectedly, and you nearly launch the royal goblet into orbit. Good, Baby says, watching you jump. Better paranoid than embalmed. You're also taught to recognize emotional poison, the politics, because sometimes the cup isn't poisoned, the moment is. And knowing when not to hand Pharaoh a drink is just as crucial. You learn to read body language, raised voices, hold the wine, scribes arguing, delay the goblet, a concubine smiling too sweetly, definitely switch to water. One afternoon, you attend a session on ancient wine varieties. The palace steward lines up amphorae and uncorks each one like a priest unveiling relics. This, he intones, is from the Delta. Earthy, heavy, very old. You nod, pretending to understand the difference between earthy and dirt-flavoured. The wine from the sycamore groves, smooth, with a hint of fig. The red vintage from Karnak, tastes like cherries and power. Your job is to memorise them, not for Pharaoh's sake, but for safety. If someone slips in something foreign or weird, you'll know, unless they're clever, then you'll be dead. Historians still argue whether cupbearers had formal roles in Pharaoh's inner circle or were glorified wine mules with fancy titles. From where you're standing, it's both. You hold a job that mixes extreme danger with extreme invisibility. People ignore you until they very much don't. There's also a ritual to every serving. First, the cup is polished with a cloth soaked in lotus oil, then held in both hands, arms extended, never above the shoulders. One bow, 2 steps forward, 3 seconds of absolute stillness. If Pharaoh nods, you pour. If he doesn't, you freeze. Any deviation and the high priest might accuse you of treason, or worse, etiquette violation. You learn the hard way one morning when you accidentally use the left hand instead of the right. Pharaoh doesn't notice, but the vizier does. You spend the next 6 hours scrubbing latrines with a stick of sandalwood. For the smell, they say. Not for your comfort, for theirs. But it's not all fear and fermented grape juice. One day, a physician visits the kitchens to lecture about balancing humours. He believes body fluids must be in harmony, blood, phlegm, bile, and wine. You're pretty sure the wine part is unofficial. Still, he brings honey cakes, so you don't argue. Later, another senior servant tells you about a past cupbearer who got promoted to Pharaoh's personal advisor. That could be you, he whispers, if you don't die first. Hope is dangerous here. It starts to feel like a spice rubbed into everything, intoxicating, bitter, rare. You practice reflexes too. A priest throws small stones at you while you hold the cup. To prepare for interruptions, he says. You're not sure what battlefield he's imagining, but you dodge well enough not to spill. At one point, a stone hits your nose. You don't cry. Much. Evenings bring relief. You sneak scraps of roast goose and sweet beer in the servant quarters. You and the other cupbearers share stories about near misses, absurd nobles, and the tragic tale of the wine jug that shattered mid-ceremony. The gods forgave him, someone mutters. The vizier didn't. You find yourself getting better. You walk straighter. You can detect nut oil from across the room. You learn to look Pharaoh in the chest, never the eyes, but still seem reverent. You stop shaking when holding the goblet. Well, mostly. You think of home less. Your hands remember what to do without thinking. The palace routines settle over you like fine dust. Never really comfortable, but familiar. Still, you keep an eye on everyone, even the palace cats. You don't trust anyone near the wine, especially the fat tomcat who once knocked over an amphora and walked away smug. And every time you raise the cup, even now your heart beats faster. Because maybe this one will be the one that ends everything. Or maybe, just maybe, it's grape juice and glory. You begin each shift by sniffing grapes like your life depends on it. Because it does. Not the big, juicy kind either. These are dried, pressed, and halfway fermented, sitting in painted amphorae, labelled in the priestly script you're only just starting to decipher. Most say things like wine for the sun festival or blessed vintage of the Nile god. One says, absolutely do not touch. Naturally, that's the one Bebby hands you. Practice on this, he grunts. It's gone sour, won't kill you. Probably. Sniffing is a full-body experience now. You close your eyes, lean in, and let the scent curl into your skull. Is that vinegar? Mould? Maybe a trace of... Is that sandalwood? No, just your own palms. Your sense of smell is getting overtrained. The other night, you dreamed someone was assassinated with spoiled plum juice. You woke up terrified of raisins. Kissing the cup is your next new duty. No, not affectionately. It's a final test before presentation. You gently press your lips to the rim, just enough to feel the surface, detect oils, or worse, residue. If there's a film of something gritty or waxy, you report it. If it tastes off, you spit. If you ever swallow without permission, they say you'll end up in the embalming hall by nightfall. A senior cupbearer tells you a story during a break, whispering from the shade of a kitchen awning. Once, a boy didn't kiss the cup, too confident. Pharaoh took one sip and spat it across the floor. You lean in. Was it poison? The man shrugs. Nope, just goat's milk. Someone mislabeled the jar, but the boy still got reassigned to crocodile stable duty. You're now acutely aware of every possible failure point. The wine, the vessel, the lips. And so, each morning, you check your breath, your hands, your mouth. Because if Pharaoh grimaces when drinking, it could be your last day with a functioning spine. Pharaoh doesn't like surprises. Serving him involves more theatre than your village festival. First, the high priest blesses the wine. Then the astrologer nods to confirm no omens, say, bad day for grapes. Finally, you're summoned with a sharp hand motion from the steward, and everything slows down. You walk with the goblet. It weighs almost a kilo and feels heavier with every step. The stem is cold, the gold lip slightly sticky from lotus oil polishing. You breathe through your nose, keep your back straight, and glide forward like a human cloud. Pharaoh holds out his hand. You bow and offer the cup, not to his mouth, but level with his chin. He takes it slowly, sips, pauses, smacks his lips, the tiniest sound in the echoing chamber, and says nothing, which is exactly what you want. You retreat with invisible steps, trying not to blink too loudly. And that, you realise, is the job. Hundreds of rehearsed anxious motions leading to a moment where nothing happens. No poison, no offence, no embarrassment. Just a sip. You return to the back wall, where the other servants are lined up like terrified statues. One winks at you. Another scratches his nose and nearly drops a platter of roasted duck. You try not to laugh, because palace laughter is a luxury, and right now, you're still in performance mode. Back in the kitchens, you report the taste. Full-bodied, slightly dusty, hints of fig and maybe ash. The wine steward snorts. That's just the amphora. We reuse them from the incense stores. A fringe theory among the junior cupbearers suggests Pharaoh likes the smoky flavour because it reminds him of burnt offerings. Historians still argue whether that's taste ritual, or just someone lying to save face. Midweek, a delivery arrives from the southern vineyards. You help unload them, tall jars sealed with beeswax, stamped with the symbol for royal consumption. One jar sloshes strangely. You pry it open carefully and discover it's full of wine and, surprise, tiny dead bees. Someone clearly misunderstood the assignment. That night, you spend hours decanting wine into clean containers, using thin linen cloth to filter out bee bits and curses. You think, briefly, of the poor farmer who probably offered this batch as a gift, thinking it was a miracle harvest. Now it's your problem. You also practice for emergencies. What if Pharaoh chokes? What if the cup spills on his lap? What if he suddenly declares the wine tastes like sadness? You run through every possible protocol. One scenario involves you catching a falling goblet mid-air, dropping to your knees, and apologizing to the gods, then immediately offering a replacement with a poem of repentance. You write that poem in your spare time. It involves grapes, divine forgiveness, and a subtle metaphor about river reeds. The palace dogs like you. One of them follows you around sometimes, a scruffy thing with one floppy ear. You feed him scraps when no one's looking. You name him Ferment. He guards your corner of the servant quarters now. You suspect he'd absolutely fail a poison check, but his companionship helps. And then one day, Bebby grunts your name. You're in rotation for the night ceremony. This is big. Evening rituals are private. Pharaoh drinks under the moonlight, sometimes alone, sometimes with just his closest priests and advisors. Only the most trusted servants are allowed to bring the wine. You bathe in sacred water. You oil your skin until you shine like a bronze statue. You press your lips to the rim, and your pulse dances behind your ears. The room is quiet, lit by flickering torches and a single moonbeam caught in polished stone. Pharaoh sits on a low dais, bareheaded, eyes closed. You approach, silent, your sandals whispering across the smooth floor. He doesn't look at you, just lifts his hand. You offer the cup. He drinks and smiles, just a little. The palace wakes before the birds. You hear it long before your eyes open. Brushes sweeping stone, sandals smacking marble, servants mumbling incantations while trying not to drop trays full of sacred bread. You roll off your mat with a groan, muscles stiff from yesterday's practice, and wonder, not for the first time, how anyone survives here long enough to grow old. Your day begins in silence. Cupbearers are to be seen and absolutely not heard until Pharaoh has eaten, bathed, and been reminded how divine he is by 3 separate priests. You shuffle to the basin room, rinse your face in cold water, and watch as another servant accidentally drops a towel. A supervisor appears instantly. The towel vanishes. So does the servant. Nobody talks about it. Today you've graduated from training shadows to full assignments. You're still not the primary bearer, but you've moved beyond just holding practice goblets and flinching when senior staff bark. Now you're in the real rhythm of the palace, a system so finely tuned it makes the Nile's flooding seem casual. You follow the palace's daily current, drifting from room to room like a polite, well-oiled ghost. First stop, the storeroom, where wine and ceremonial oils are counted down to the last drop. The clerk, a bitter man with 12 ink-stained fingers, recites numbers like curses. You watch as he smashes a jug on purpose. Too old, he mutters, would insult the gods. You glance around and see no gods reacting, but nod anyway. Then it's off to the temple kitchen. Different from the palace kitchen, obviously. The temple kitchen is quieter, filled with fragrant offerings. Honeyed dates, barley cakes, roast duck stuffed with pomegranates. You're not allowed to eat any of it, but you are allowed to carry it, and carrying sacred duck in front of priests counts as prestige. You pass through hallways so polished they reflect your legs. Wall reliefs show stories of Pharaoh defeating enemies with one arm while holding an ankh in the other. You count how many of those scenes include a servant behind him holding a cup. It's more than you'd expect. By mid-morning, you're assisting at a planning meeting for an afternoon ritual. It's being led by the vizier, who has all the warmth of a sun-scorched scorpion. He points at people with a bronze stylus and barks things like, "The lotus must face north, and no figs this time, they upset the gods." You're tasked with preparing a specific type of wine, aged, dark, slightly sweet. You go to the wine cellar, which smells like damp stone and secrets. The torches flicker as you uncork each amphora and sniff, tasting just enough to verify quality. One jar contains something so pungent it nearly knocks you out. You mark it raid level only and move on. By now, your feet ache. Palace sandals are more for show than comfort, but you push through, moving with the quiet determination of someone who knows a single clumsy step might get them reassigned to crocodile pit drainage duty. Lunchtime doesn't exist. You sneak a bite of dry bread between deliveries, sharing it with Ferment the dog, who now follows you like a furry wine security detail. He's gotten good at sniffing for cheese, less so for poison. Afternoon arrives with trumpet blasts and the rhythmic chanting of priests. You assist during a wine-pouring ritual that involves a platform, an eagle feather, and an extremely specific prayer sung 3 octaves too high. Your arms tremble from holding the goblet aloft for 23 minutes straight. Still, Pharaoh nods when the wine is poured. You take that as a small win. Palace life is endless movement. By early evening, the halls glow gold from the setting sun. You're sent to polish the ceremonial cups, some made from gold, others from blue faience, all covered in hieroglyphs that you suspect say things like, "Do not drop." You polish each one with such care it borders on reverence, not just for Pharaoh, but for your own survival. Then, just when you think the day is over, you're summoned to help during an impromptu inspection. Pharaoh has decided to stroll the Hall of Offerings. This means the wine must be refreshed, the incense relit, and every servant visible must look like they've just been personally sculpted by the gods. You stand behind the main cupbearer, arms tense, eyes forward. Pharaoh walks past. He's wearing a leopard skin sash and sandals that click in a way that commands silence. He pauses, turns, points at your cup. "This vintage?" he asks. You freeze. The main bearer answers, "Aged from the Delta, my lord. Blessed by the temple at sunrise." Pharaoh considers, sips, smiles, and keeps walking. Your breath escapes in a quiet wheeze of relief. That night, you sit with the other cupbearers under a canopy near the servants' quarters. Someone strums a stringed instrument. You trade jokes about nobles who smell like onions and priests who trip over their own robes. You learn that one of the high-ranking scribes once accidentally wrote "blessed dung" instead of "blessed dung repellent" on a scroll. You laugh, because the alternative is realizing how close you came to disaster today. Historians still argue whether palace servants formed real friendships or simply alliances of convenience. But tonight, as you lean back with Ferment snoring at your side and the stars overhead flicker like quiet gossip, you feel something warm settle in your chest. Not wine, not fear, belonging, just for a moment, until tomorrow. You squint as the morning sun bounces off every surface in the palace like it's trying to blind you personally. Everything here is gold. Polished gold, hammered gold, gold over wood, gold pretending to be something else. Even the walls seemed to glow. You once tried blinking faster to see if it helped. It didn't, just made you look suspicious. Today your main task is polishing, again, but not just anything. You've been assigned to the ceremonial chalice, the one Pharaoh uses during high feast days, rumoured to be older than your grandmother's ghost stories. It's a two-handled beast, heavy as sin, engraved with scenes of Pharaoh defeating chaos with his divine jawline. The thing is entirely gold, and somehow too gold, like it mocks you for being alive and unshiny. You polish it with a cloth made from sacred flax and a drop of hippo oil soap. That's not a metaphor. It smells like regret and wet leather. But the chalice glows after a few passes, and you can almost see your own nervous face in it. Good, says the steward inspecting your work. He won't notice it. That means you've done well. That's the rule here. Perfection is invisibility. You've started noticing just how much gold clutters the palace. The thrones, gold. The chariots, inlaid with gold. The doorknobs, yep, golden falcons with tiny, judgy eyes. You once walked past a display of gold sandals. For a brief moment, you considered the absurd possibility of golden socks. You shook it off, but you're not totally sure they don't exist. A scholar visiting from the temple once explained that gold doesn't tarnish, which means it's divine. It reflects eternity, he said, with the expression of someone who's never tried cleaning a gold-plated wine jar with a toothbrush. You smiled and nodded while silently naming a new beetle you found in the storeroom after him. Still, there's something mesmerizing about it all. The way gold catches fire in candlelight. The way it turns ordinary tools, spoons, combs, footrests, into sacred relics. The way even Pharaoh's toenail clippers are made from the stuff. Probably, one evening, you accompany Bebi to the treasury for a delivery. It's a place few servants go without supervision. The moment you walk in, your eyes ache. Shelves upon shelves of statues, plates, ornaments, all gleaming. You spot a model boat made entirely of gold. For his afterlife cruise, Bebi says, deadpan. You're not sure if he's joking. You decide it's best not to ask. In a quiet corner, you see a collection of golden flies. Awards, whispers a clerk, given for bravery in battle. You raise an eyebrow. Flies? He shrugs. Symbolic, or ironic. Historians still argue. You quickly learn that while everything looks luxurious, it's not built for comfort. Gold is heavy, gold is slippery, gold absorbs heat like it's trying to punish you. Once, during midday prayers, you had to carry a tray with 4 gold goblets across the outer courtyard. The sun turned the handles into tiny stovetops. You managed not to scream but left fingerprints behind that probably still smell like roasted palm. Pharaoh's throne is the ultimate display. It's enormous, shaped like a lion, flanked by cobra heads, inlaid with turquoise and, yes, more gold. You're only allowed to see it during official ceremonies, but when you do, it makes your knees lock. It looks less like a seat and more like a divine ultimatum. You wonder what it's like to sit on something that expensive. Is it comfortable? Probably not. Is it impressive? Unquestionably. Does Pharaoh ever slip and accidentally impale himself on one of the ornamental vultures? You hope not. But the thought lingers. Then there's the gold in places no one sees. The burial chambers. The secret rooms. You've heard whispers that Pharaoh's own sarcophagus is made entirely of gold layered with crushed lapis and obsidian. The artisans who worked on it. Some say they were buried alongside the piece to honour their work. Others say to keep it secret. You try not to think too hard about which version is true. One evening, you walk past a hallway being redecorated. Two artists are applying gold leaf to a relief of the sun god. It's painstaking work. Layers of beaten foil no thicker than a whisper, applied with a brush made from mouse whiskers. You pause and watch. One artist catches your eye and smirks. Want to try? Your hands tremble as you hold the brush. You apply a tiny patch to a sunbeam. It shines, soft and perfect. You smile. It's fleeting, but real. Then you remember you're late and sprint back with the grace of a startled ostrich. The next day, the overseer of offerings stops you. Pharaoh liked the gold pattern on the southern relief, he says flatly. You didn't touch it, did you? You shake your head with the innocence of a liar. He stares at you for a beat too long, then walks away. You don't breathe for 27 heartbeats. Back in the servants' quarters, someone asks, why do they gild everything, even the walls? A junior scribe chimes in. So the gods can see us. Gold reflects their light. You nod thoughtfully, but privately. You wonder if it's less about gods and more about power. Gold is the language of the palace. It says, I can afford to coat my toothbrush in this. It says even my chamber pot is radiant. It says don't look too long unless you want to feel poor forever. And every day, as you polish another radiant goblet or carry a glinting tray past another mural lined in gold leaf, you understand more clearly. This place isn't designed for comfort. It's designed to dazzle. You're standing in a linen queue. Again, but this time it's not because your last kilt fell into a ceremonial basin. It did. Or because the palace beetles got into the fabric storage. They did. No, this time it's wardrobe protocol. There's a feast coming, a big one, which means your outfit has to be flawless, your kohl eyeliner symmetrical, and your sweat glands fully obedient. The palace attire supervisor, a woman named Ired, who has never once blinked, inspects you. Tunic, too short. Legs, unevenly oiled. Face, tragic. She flicks a finger and you're spun around like a linen-wrapped rotisserie chicken. She applies scented oil to your neck with all the warmth of a tax audit. This is Blue Lotus, she explains. Expensive. Smells divine. Do not ruin it with your natural musk. The Cupbearer dress code, as you've learned, is as strict as any military uniform. Every fold of your kilt must align with the sacred triangle motif. Your sash must rest across your left shoulder, not your right, and your eyeliner. It must be applied with the precision of a royal architect drawing a temple floor plan. Wobbly lines equals divine offence. Probably. And here's the thing. You have to do it yourself. There's no royal makeup artist for you. You sit on a low stool, holding a bronze mirror polished to a blurry shine, trying to apply green malachite pigment to your eyelids without poking yourself into blindness. Meanwhile, another cupbearer beside you whispers, if you get one eye bigger than the other, just say it's an offering to Horus. You giggle, just enough to mess up your left line. Now you have the eye of slightly annoyed Horus, he adds. Palace cosmetics are serious business. You quickly learn that the most heated rivalries in court aren't about land, titles, or gold. They're about who wore which pigment first. One noble got side-eyed for months after copying a royal cousin's cobalt-accented look. Eyebrow theft, someone called it. You overhear a priest whisper that the sacred jars of eyeliner are blessed with anti-infection properties. Historians still argue whether the lead-based pigment actually helped eye health, or was just a fabulous way to go blind slowly. The higher up the palace food chain you go, the more elaborate the looks. You once saw a royal concubine enter a feast with gold-dusted eyelids and eyebrows shaped like falcon wings. She didn't eat a bite, just sat in profile while people admired her contouring. For servants, the expectations are more modest, but no less demanding. You're expected to look clean, polished, symmetrical. Like a well-folded offering, Iret says. Then there's the jewellery. For formal feasts, even you wear a simple collar, coloured beads in a pattern that supposedly represents cosmic balance. It's itchy. You try not to scratch. Once you did, and a piece snapped off, bounced into a food tray, and nearly went into a noble's duck stew. You're still recovering from that incident emotionally. On the day of the great feast, the palace transforms. Incense burns from every brazier. Musicians warm up their flutes and lyres. The floors are scrubbed until you could eat figs off them, and someone probably will. The decorators scatter fresh lotus petals in the grand hall. You help with final setups, positioning goblets, fluffing cushions, and arranging tiny gold utensils you're definitely not allowed to touch too long. Then the nobles arrive. You've never seen so much fabric in motion, gowns with sleeves that trail like scrolls, beaded wigs that shimmer with every turn, sandals that have clearly never touched dirt. It's not just a meal, it's fashion warfare. You spot two noble women giving each other smile smirks that could curdle milk. She's wearing last moon's shell pattern, someone whispers. Bold. You try not to make eye contact with anyone, especially the man with the leopard print cloak and a headdress shaped like a duck. No one knows who he is, but everyone nods respectfully. You line up beside the head cupbearer, holding a polished chalice. As guests settle onto low couches, you approach with the practiced calm of someone who has absolutely no time to process how ridiculous this all is. Pharaoh arrives last, naturally. The room goes still. He's dressed in a pleated robe that glows faintly in the torchlight. Eyeliner so sharp it could cut fruit, and enough gold to make a miner faint. He smiles, and a dozen musicians immediately switch tempo. The feast begins. You pour, you bow, you glide from goblet to goblet. You catch glimpses of the drama unfurling, envoys side-eyeing each other over roasted ox, priests whispering behind fans, a noble who is definitely trying to seduce her cousin. Again. You focus on the wine, the rhythm, the ritual. Then there's eyeliner panic. One of the nobles, a favoured cousin of Pharaoh no less, wipes her brow and smears her perfectly drawn lines. A disaster. She freezes, horrified. A scribe quietly hands her a cloth. She glares at him as if he handed her a dead toad. You edge away, pretending not to see the meltdown. Back in the servants' corner, you swap updates between rounds. She smeared the Eye of Ra. Did you see the vizier's necklace? It had a scorpion on it. I heard it was a scorpion. You finish your shift dizzy from incense, eye paint, and the sheer emotional whiplash of trying to look flawless while hauling goblets the weight of a newborn calf. Later that night, you peel off your kilt and fall into your mat like a collapsed linen tent. Ferment curls up by your feet, tail twitching with dreams of duck bones. You close your eyes and swear you still smell lotus and judgment. The palace is buzzing, not literally, though with all the honey cakes and wine, you wouldn't be surprised if the bees held a weekly rave in the storerooms. No, this buzz is human, urgent, intentional, because tonight Pharaoh hosts a grand feast, not just any dinner. This is the kind of event where gods get thanked, alliances get forged, and someone definitely ends up crying into a fig tart by the third course. As a cupbearer, you don't get a menu, you get an assignment. Be invisible, be graceful, and don't drop anything. which, considering tonight's guest list, includes several high priests, 4 generals, a poet who accidentally insulted the crocodile god last week, and at least 3 members of Pharaoh's extended family with vendettas older than some pyramids. Well, no pressure. You start your afternoon polishing the ceremonial goblets again, but this time they're special. The blue glazed ones with gold rims used only for divine toasting. You wonder if the wine tastes better in these, or if it's like drinking expensive water through a diamond straw. Still fancy, still ridiculous. The head cupbearer runs a pre-feast drill like a general leading troops into battle. Order of service is crucial, he bellows. Pharaoh first, then high priest, then seated guests in clockwise rank order. We will not repeat last month's debacle with the ambassador from Byblos. You weren't there, but legend says he was served second instead of third and retaliated by sending Pharaoh a donkey covered in fish guts. You memorize your route, rehearse your bows, and remind yourself where not to look, Pharaoh's direct gaze, and what not to step on, the sacred ibis statue in the corner that's cursed, apparently. Evening comes fast. The sky bleeds purple and orange over the Nile, and the palace glows like a lantern from another world. Braziers flicker. Incense fogs the entry halls. Servants flit through the corridors in perfectly timed waves. You take your position behind a curtain, chalice ready, heart pounding so loud, you're sure the noble woman beside you can hear it. And then Pharaoh enters. He doesn't walk. He arrives, draped in white and gold, crown glinting, expression unreadable. The room goes so still you can hear the drip of date syrup into a nearby bowl. He ascends his dais. Everyone bows. You bow. You nearly forget to breathe. The feast begins. First course, pomegranate duck glazed with honey and river salt. You circulate slowly, pouring wine from a vessel shaped like a lion. The high priest wrinkles his nose. It's red, he says. It should be rose-coloured. You freeze. He frowns, then shrugs. Never mind, the gods will cope. Second course, barley cakes shaped like fish. You watch a general eat 3 without blinking. Someone's lyre music gets too enthusiastic and a string snaps mid-song, flinging a bead into the dessert tray. You retrieve it quietly and hope no one was planning to eat the honeyed figs. Then Pharaoh laughs. It's sudden, loud, the kind of laugh that makes people nervously chuckle along even if they miss the joke. You glance over. He's leaning toward a guest, a foreign envoy with the world's most alarming moustache. They're gesturing animatedly with half-eaten goose legs. Whatever was said, Pharaoh found it hilarious. You mark the moment as safe zone. Laughter is good. It means less chance of beheadings. Midway through the third course, you hit a snag. You approach with a refill, balancing 2 goblets and 1 ceremonial ladle. A noble woman stretches her arm, gesturing too broadly, and her sleeve knocks your tray. It wobbles. You shift your weight, channel every practice drill, and do not spill a drop. Your fingers grip like sacred vines. A nearby guest gasps. Pharaoh notices. You brace for judgment. He raises an eyebrow, then nods, almost imperceptibly. You walk away with the dignity of someone who's just been knighted by silence. Later, the poetry begins. A bard stands wobbly from wine and begins to recite something about Pharaoh being the sun in human form and a lotus floating on eternity's pond. It's beautiful. It's also too long. Half the room stifles yawns. One scribe quietly takes bets on how many verses it will last. The answer is 14. You win a candied almond. As wine flows, the room shifts. People loosen. Robes slip from shoulders. Jokes grow louder. One noble claims his pet monkey writes better tax policies than the current vizier. You're not sure if he's joking. Then comes the divine toast. You approach with the ceremonial chalice, gold, encrusted with lapis, so heavy your arms already ache. The high priest intones a blessing. Pharaoh lifts the cup, his fingers steady. He says a few words, something about peace, prosperity, the Nile not rebelling, and drinks. Everyone claps. Everyone drinks. Even the monkey. Not joking, he sips from a silver bowl. You step back into the shadows, watching the glow of torches dance across golden headdresses and coal-lined eyes. You breathe. You survived the most important part of the night. But the night isn't over. A concubine faints. Someone starts singing a hymn in the wrong key. A tray of oysters turns out to be far too enthusiastic in the heat. There's a brief scuffle between a general and a merchant over whether Pharaoh's sandals are made from gazelle or oxhide. Historians still argue this, by the way. You stay calm. You keep pouring. You navigate the madness like a boat on a chaotic, extremely scented river. When it's over and guests begin to stagger out, you help clean. The air reeks of wine, perfume, roasted meat, and triumph. You catch Pharaoh's eye one last time. He raises his cup slightly, maybe in salute, maybe just to finish the dregs. Either way, it's a nod. And in this palace, a nod from a god is worth more than gold. There's something different in the air today. Not the usual scent of lotus oil, sweat, and barely contained ambition. It's sharper, dusty, foreign. You smell it even before the horns sound at the southern gate. Visitors are coming. You scramble into position along the main hall, cup held at the ready, tunic crisp, eyeliner mercifully even. Pharaoh is expecting guests from faraway lands, and you know what that means. Endless ceremonial nonsense, elaborate gifts, and the distinct possibility of being asked to drink something unspeakable in the spirit of diplomacy. You've done this before. Foreign visitors arrive every few moons. Envoys from lands with unpronounceable gods, odd footwear, and deeply suspicious cheeses. Today's delegation is said to be from Karu near the sea. They've travelled for weeks to bring tribute and try not to offend anyone important. You stand still as the visitors enter, robes the colour of sunburnt clay, tall feathered headdresses, and enough perfume to knock out a small donkey. They walk slowly, probably both out of reverence and the sheer exhaustion of wearing 8 layers in 40-degree heat. One of them carries a monkey, another leads a small antelope on a leash, and then come the gifts. First, gold, always gold, a show of respect, yes, but also a polite bribe to ensure Pharaoh doesn't consider conquering your city next week. Next, fabrics, deep purples and midnight blues dyed with crushed sea snails. One priest gasps softly, and you're pretty sure it's because that exact hue is reserved for stargazing ceremonies. Then, food. This is your domain. You lean in slightly, eyes on the baskets as they're opened. Figs the size of fists, honey cakes shaped like moons, and something that looks suspicious. It's a wheel of something, yellow, firm, emitting a smell that declares war on your nostrils. "What is that?" someone whispers. "Cheese," answers a scribe. "From goats, left in caves, for flavour. That smell has intentions. Still you bow respectfully. Later you'll definitely not be tasting that unless required by law or divine command." One foreign noble gestures toward the wine. You're summoned forward. Pour slowly, gracefully. They nod approvingly. You're offered a cup in return, a wine from their homeland, dark and spicy, smelling faintly of pepper and something like roasted bark. You taste it with care. It's different. but not poisoned. Probably. Pharaoh samples it, doesn't spit. Good sign. Then comes the real entertainment. Watching foreigners try to understand court etiquette. One attempts to bow but ends up squatting awkwardly, like a confused frog. Another offers a gift with his left hand. There's a small gasp from the priests. You maintain a stone face, but internally you're screaming. Pharaoh, ever divine, says nothing. His smile is serene, his eyes unreadable. You think maybe he enjoys this, a performance, with him as the eternal sun at the centre. Later, there's a tour of the sacred courtyard. You trail behind, carrying a spare goblet. The foreign guests sweat visibly. One mutters something about too many birds. They're referring to the ibises, who patrol the fountain like judgmental priests. One of them hisses at the monkey. You consider intervening. You decide to let fate sort it out. The monkey climbs a palm tree. Things are escalating. A priest is called to negotiate with the monkey. You step back to avoid being involved in what will certainly be a diplomatic incident if monkey droppings land on anyone's offering tray. Back in the feast hall, a spread is prepared for the guests. You watch them eye the dishes suspiciously. Roasted quail, lentils with cumin, lotus root pastries. One picks up a stuffed date, sniffs it, and raises his eyebrows. Another tries the beer, coughs, and pretends it's delicious. But it's a two-way street. The guests offer their delicacies too. Dried octopus, spiced fish paste, and, because fate hates you, a second kind of cheese, this one blue and aggressively smelly. Your role, of course, is to taste first. You do. Bravely, nobly, the cheese punches you in the soul. You recover quickly, smile, nod, pretend it's lovely. Pharaoh watches, amused. You think you see the corner of his mouth twitch. Historians still argue whether these exchanges were mostly political theatre or genuine attempts at cross-cultural friendship. In your experience, they're mostly an excuse to swap strange food and marvel at how weird everyone else smells. After the feast, gifts are exchanged again, this time smaller, more personal. One foreign noble presents Pharaoh with a tiny alabaster figurine. Another gives a scroll in a language no one here can read. You receive nothing, but someone hands Ferment a dried fig, which he eats with suspicious enthusiasm. As the guests leave, you breathe easier. No one died. No one was insulted publicly. The monkey only peed on one official's headdress, and he wasn't that important. You return the goblets to the storeroom, your hand still scented faintly of sea spice and foreign oil. You rinse your mouth with date wine to banish the cheese demons. That night, you collapse onto your mat, brain buzzing with accents, outfits, and monkey shrieks. You wonder if you'll ever be sent to one of these distant lands. Probably not. Your whole life is within these gold walls. But for a moment today, the outside world reached in, and it was smelly, confusing, terrifying, and kind of wonderful. You're woken by silence, not the good kind, the heavy, syrupy hush of pre-dawn peace, but the brittle kind, the kind where everyone's breathing too quietly and nobody will look you in the eye. You sit up, brush fig crumbs from your tunic, and notice that Bebby isn't shouting, he's pacing. That's worse. A whisper ripples through the servant quarters. Someone's planning something. Conspiracies aren't unheard of in the palace. Usually they amount to little more than someone trying to sneak an extra goose leg or convincing a priest that the wine was spiritually delayed. But this has weight, gravity. Even Ferment isn't wagging his tail. He just stares at the doorway like it might grow teeth. Your instructions come in a note slipped under your mat. No name, just deliver wine to the eastern antechamber. Midnight. No witnesses. Now you know what you're supposed to do. Hand it to the overseer, tell him everything, let the guards sort it out. But you also know that in palace politics, knowing too much is like balancing a full goblet during an earthquake. You spill a little, your head rolls. You spill nothing. You might still get tripped on purpose. You don't tell anyone. Not yet. That night, you move quietly, not sneaky. Sneaky is suspicious. You just exist less. You blend. A second shadow in the hallways. The eastern antechamber is used for quiet meetings, religious debates, financial discussions, and the occasional, oops, we started a civil war kind of talk. You arrive early, goblet warm in your hands, wine sloshing gently. The door opens. 2 figures step inside, one robed, one armoured. You press into the shadowed wall, unseen. They speak in low voices, clipped and fast. He's weak, says the armoured one, distracted, surrounded by flatterers. The priests are divided, the robed one replies. The gods will not intervene. You freeze. This isn't about bad wine or stolen papyrus. This is a coup. They're talking about Pharaoh. You try to slip away unnoticed, you really do. But your heel catches a loose reed mat and makes the tiniest scuff, barely audible over the murmurs. But they hear a flash of movement. The armoured one turns. You bolt. You don't stop running until you're in the back kitchen, panting like a marathon goat. You throw yourself behind a spice crate and try to figure out whether you've just signed your own death order. Morning comes with more silence. No arrests, no new guards. Pharaoh appears at his morning offering like nothing's wrong. He drinks the wine you help pour, smiles faintly at a dancer's clumsy twirl. For a moment, you wonder if you imagined it all, but that night, Bebby corners you. Where were you yesterday? You play dumb, blink slowly, polishing goblets. He snorts. If you're going to lie, at least lie like someone who isn't being watched. Your blood turns to dust. You didn't hear this from me, he mutters. But things shift quickly in the palace. Loyalties dissolve. You nod, not sure what you're agreeing to. Then, unexpectedly, you're summoned to serve at a private evening meal. Just Pharaoh, just the vizier, and you. You think it's a test. The room is quiet, lit only by a few oil lamps. Pharaoh sits cross-legged, chewing on a honeyed fig. The vizier watches you like a falcon eyeing a rat with bad posture. You serve, bow, retreat to your post. Pharaoh doesn't speak for a long time. Then softly, too many whisper lately. The vizier's lip twitches. Pharaoh turns his gaze to you. You hear anything, young one? You feel every bead of sweat building a swimming pool between your shoulder blades. No, my lord. You're not sure if it's the right answer. You only know it's the safest one. He nods. Good. Sometimes silence is service. He finishes his fig. The vizier smiles, but only with the top half of his face. You're dismissed. Back in the servant quarters, you don't sleep. Historians still argue whether there was ever a real conspiracy during the mid-throne years of Pharaoh Nebmart's reign. Some claim it was priestly gossip blown out of proportion. Others suggest the entire priesthood split down the middle and engaged in a bloodless civil war of scroll edits and calendar manipulation. You know the truth is slipperier. There was something. You heard it, felt it. And you know enough now to pretend you know nothing. You become cautious. You check every cup twice. You watch the guards watching each other. You nod politely to scribes who suddenly look too interested in your daily route. One leaves a lotus flower in your washing basin. You burn it. Your friends don't ask questions. The others notice the change but say nothing. They know better. Palace servants live by a code. Don't know what you don't need to know, and don't say what you think you know out loud. Still, something in you shifts. You realise that the cup you carry doesn't just hold wine, it holds secrets. And sometimes poison doesn't need to touch the lips. Sometimes it just needs to be whispered near them. Today begins with a comb, not a gold one, not one shaped like a sacred falcon or blessed with an inscription from the Book of the Dead, just a plain old lice comb. Because, surprise, part of your promotion involves personal hygiene detail. Congratulations, says Bebby, without a hint of irony. You've been entrusted with Pharaoh's head. You blink. You'll assist in the royal grooming chambers, he continues. Do not touch the royal scalp. Do not look too long at the royal scalp. And absolutely do not mention if you see anything jumping. Ah, yes. The high honour of NIT patrol. You arrive at the grooming chamber, which smells like rose oil, sandalwood, and the kind of sharp soap that burns your soul clean. A pair of attendants are already laying out Pharaoh's morning kit. Coal pots, hair oils, delicate tweezers made of ivory, and something Bebby reverently refers to as the sacred spoon. It is, in fact, a tiny curved tool used for ear cleaning. You are not mentally prepared for it to be treated like a religious relic. You'll be in charge of the spoon, says a perfumer with more rings than fingers. Use it gently. Think of it as a prayer. You nod solemnly. You are now, apparently, the royal ear whisperer. Pharaoh arrives barefoot with the air of someone who hasn't slept but will destroy a kingdom over a scratchy scalp. You bow. You don't breathe. He sits and the routine begins. 2 attendants oil his hair, 1 braids, you hold the comb tray. Another begins delicately removing anything that shouldn't be there with the patience of a monk playing pickup sticks. You pass the spoon. Pharaoh says nothing. Good. If he talks, you might drop it. And dropping the sacred spoon has the ominous ring of something that ends in, and then we never saw him again. You learn quickly. The days take on a new rhythm. Wine in the morning, scalp vigilance in the afternoon. You rotate through duties, back to cupbearer service at mealtimes, and then back to tending the very head that drinks the wine you serve. It's strangely intimate, this job. You begin to notice Pharaoh's habits, how he touches his eyebrow when thinking, how he sighs softly when annoyed, how he always has a dry patch behind his right ear. You say nothing. You are a shadow, a well-oiled, well-combed, quiet shadow. And with this new role comes proximity, real proximity. You begin hearing things. Quiet conversations between Pharaoh and the vizier, grumbling priests asking about omens, scrolls read aloud that mention distant rebellions or missing tribute caravans. You keep your face blank and your ears open. Sometimes you wish you didn't. One afternoon, Pharaoh mutters to his steward. The high priest is pushing for another temple, as if sand and stone bring the gods closer. The steward chuckles. Closer to his pockets, maybe. You pretend to count the coal pots. Another day, a servant cuts Pharaoh during a shave. A drop of blood beads on his cheek. The room freezes. You swear you hear a fly faint mid-air. The barber bows so deeply he may never walk upright again. Pharaoh raises a hand. Everyone braces. Then he just says, "Careful." The barber weeps, quietly. It's a reminder. Power here is subtle, but absolute. You're handed a new responsibility, maintaining the purification basin. Every morning you check the water temperature. It must be perfect, not warm, not cold, divinely ideal. You test with your elbow, as taught. If it feels like nothing at all, you've done well. One day, a fly lands on the water surface just as Pharaoh approaches. You panic. You flick it away so fast your hand slaps the surface. The water ripples. Pharaoh stops. You freeze. He stares at the basin, then at you. You bow so deeply your spine protests. He walks away. You live another day. Historians still argue whether cupbearers were simply glorified butlers or wielded real influence as the pharaoh's most consistent companion. You now believe both are true. You serve, you listen, you hold secrets in one hand and lice combs in the other. One night, a scribe sneaks you a scrap of papyrus. You're being watched, it says. They think you're loyal to the wrong side. You burn the note, slowly, then feed the ash to Ferment's bowl just in case someone finds the fire pit. At this level, everyone's pretending, even you. A priest once told you the gods can see everything, but here in the palace you're pretty sure they've blinked. You keep your routine clean, predictable. You do your job. You wash the basin. You warm the oils. You spoon the ears. And at night, you lie awake wondering if any of this is still about wine, or if you're now one step from becoming a player in a game that doesn't have rules, just silent moves and sudden disappearances. You drift into sleep with the scent of rose oil in your nose and the sacred spoon in your dreams. You're in a tomb, not dead, yet, just temporarily misplaced in the afterlife. Let's rewind. It all started when Pharaoh decided to conduct the Night of Death, an elaborate symbolic ritual meant to honor the cycle of rebirth. It's usually performed in a temple with candles, chanting, and maybe a priest in a jackal mask who takes things a bit too seriously. But this year, Pharaoh wants the full immersive experience. Build a mock tomb, he commands. So they do. And guess who gets chosen to accompany him inside with the ceremonial wine? That's right, you. Because nothing says spiritual renewal like being locked underground with the divine ruler of Egypt, a team of fanatical priests, and enough incense to fumigate a pyramid. Preparation is meticulous. The wine must be blessed 7 times. The goblet must be soaked in holy water. You must fast for a day, not even a fig, and wear linen so fine it nearly evaporates when touched. You're told this is an honor. You are not convinced. The ritual begins at dusk. You follow Pharaoh through a narrow corridor lined with flickering torches and painted with scenes of the underworld. Boats gliding through rivers of fire, crocodiles with human arms, serpents devouring stars. Comforting stuff. Pharaoh walks in silence, wearing a simple white robe and an expression of serene detachment. You carry the goblet behind him, gripping it like it might bite you. Inside the tomb chamber, real but temporarily borrowed from a noble who is thankfully not using it yet. The walls close around you. The air is thick. The chanting begins. You kneel, you pour. Pharaoh raises the cup to the heavens, or more accurately, the low ceiling painted with constellations, and drinks. And then he lies down. This is part of the ritual, symbolic death. You remind yourself of this, again, while watching priests drape him in a shroud. Then they turn to you. One priest gestures, kneel. Another offers you a mask, jackal, fitting. They chant something that loosely translates to, guide the soul with steadiness and a steady pouring hand. And then they seal the door. Yep, they shut you inside. It's supposed to be just for the night. Symbolic darkness, deep silence, connection to the gods. You try very hard not to hyperventilate. Pharaoh is still, not dead, probably meditating. You try to follow his lead, settling onto the cold stone floor, back straight, thoughts quiet. Your thoughts are not quiet. You think about the weight of the stone door, The absence of windows, the fact that ferment is definitely not qualified to lead your funeral procession. You think about the cup in your hand and whether the gods would accept spilled wine as a substitute offering if you panic and drop it. Hours pass. You think about every mistake you've ever made. You relive the time you spilled wax on Pharaoh's reading scroll. The time you said blessed dung instead of blessed dust during a toast. The time you kissed the cup a beat too long and someone snickered. You think you see a beetle crawling along the wall. You name it regret. Suddenly Pharaoh stirs. He sits up, calmly, no theatrics, just rises. You've done well, he says softly. You nearly sob from relief. The door creaks open. Dawn light spills in, golden and soft like a dream. Pharaoh steps into the light, radiant and reborn. The priests chant louder. Incense floods the corridor. Somewhere a sistrum rattles. The tomb sighs with centuries of imaginary spirits being pushed out by sunshine. You follow, blinking like a mole, cup still clutched in hand, knees wobbly. Later, you find out not every cupbearer has been invited to this ritual. It's usually reserved for the high priest, the royal scribe, or a particularly favoured concubine. Why you? No one says. But now they look at you differently. You, the one who shared Pharaoh's mock death. You, the one who came back from the symbolic underworld without wetting yourself. A near miss. You don't say much about it. Partly because you're still processing the trauma, and partly because anything you say could make you sound important. And important people in the palace. They tend to disappear. Still, you hear the whispers. Chosen. Trusted. Marked. Historians still argue whether the pharaohs ever performed actual death rituals, or if it was all pageantry. The truth. Some rituals were symbolic. Others, well, you wouldn't put it past them to go full method. You resume your duties, but there's a change. Guards nod when you pass. A priest offers you fruit without being asked. Even Bebby stops barking for a full 10 seconds one morning before resuming with an insult about your elbow posture. You keep your head down, but your eyes open. Because once you've lain in a tomb beside a living god, everything changes. You know now that the palace isn't just gold and gossip, it's also shadows and symbols. And sometimes, the path to power is paved with silence, wine, and very, very careful breathing. Summer arrives like a punishment. The air thickens. It becomes less something you breathe and more something that tries to drown you politely. Stone walls sweat. People glisten. The Nile swells with confidence. And the palace? It becomes a slow-cooked oven with gold trim and overly ambitious incense. You wake drenched, not from nightmares, though those continue, thank you tomb experience, but from sheer heat. Your linen tunic clings like a second, slightly damp skin. Ferment refuses to leave the shade of a water jug. You consider joining him. Today, you're on temple rotation. Wine for the priesthood, ceremonial hydration for the divine bureaucrats, and enough bowing to wear out your spine. In theory, this is a light duty. In reality, it's politics with sweating. The temples hum with activity. Priests chant in time with the sun's position. Offerings are arranged with obsessive precision. You carry a polished tray with 2 wine goblets and 1 cup of not wine, some fermented barley tonic that smells like burnt math. You deliver the drinks. Carefully, you smile, numbly, and then you're asked to stay. The high priest gestures. Stay, pour, witness. You pour, you witness, and oh, do you witness. The temple has its own games. The priests are not just holy men, they're power players, some louder, some quieter. but all clawing at influence in a space where Pharaoh is both deity and decision-maker. And if the gods speak through Pharaoh, you'd better believe they're working hard to be the ones whispering closest to his ear. Two priests argue over how many figs should be placed on the solar altar. A third insists that these figs were grown on the wrong side of the Nile and may anger Horus. You resist the urge to scream into your cup. Figures. They're fighting over figs. You start to understand. It's not about fruit. It's about control. Later, in the courtyard, you pass a group of junior priests reenacting a blessing ceremony for practice. One of them gets a line wrong and is smacked with a scroll. Another one gets a line too right and is smacked for arrogance. There is no winning here. You begin carrying a second cloth, one for sweat. It's not official. It's survival. Your face drips every time you cross the sun-drenched walkways between buildings. You stop caring how you look. Everyone stinks. Even the nobles have started smelling like spicy despair. Still, the rituals continue. You help with the moon festival prep. Pharaoh will make an appearance and the wine must be lunar blessed. That means chilling the jars in temple basins overnight and chanting at them every hour. Yes, you chant at the wine. You do it because Bebi says you'll be reassigned to dung collection if you don't. You believe him. At the temple, a scribe pulls you aside. "You're the one from the tomb," he whispers. You nod cautiously. "They say you were reborn," he says, "that you carry the god's scent. You sincerely hope the scent is just rose oil, because you've been sweating for days, and may also carry hints of fermented date." Still, you nod again. Mysteriously. The fewer words you speak, the more magical people assume you are. Later that week, the palace is struck with a minor scandal. Someone has been stealing sandal oil from the royal store. Accusations fly. Servants glare at each other. A search is conducted. You find out it was a priest. He was trading it for rare fish paste. You say nothing. There's a growing tension between palace officials and temple leadership. Nothing overt. Just frost beneath the heat. The kind of silence that says, "We're smiling now, but if this keeps up, someone's going to end up cursed into a statue." Historians still debate whether this period marked the beginning of a larger religious schism. You're not sure. You only know that more priests than usual are showing up for wine tastings. You keep your head down. One day, you're asked to deliver a special cup directly to the sun altar. You climb, slowly. The stones are hot enough to grill a goat. You reach the top. The altar gleams, pure white, lined with obsidian, and flanked by carved falcons. You place the cup. You back away. You glance out over the city, the temple roofs, the crowded markets, the Nile twisting like a living thing. It hits you. You're up here, in the sweltering heart of power, while your village is probably 5 chickens and a loaf of bread into breakfast. You've changed. You've become a part of this place, a cog in the machinery of divine bureaucracy, and you're sweating in places no one warned you about. On your way down, you pass the crocodile pool. You pause. The high priest is there, watching them. He doesn't see you. One of the beasts blinks slowly. The priest throws in a scrap of meat. He murmurs something under his breath. You hear only one word, patience. You move on. That night, your dreams are thick and strange. The gods whisper. The wine sings. A crocodile tells you the figs were fine all along. You wake with your kilt stuck to your back and a faint headache. But you also wake with something else. An understanding. This palace. This summer. this temple maze of politics and incense and heat. It's not madness. It's the way things survive. And somehow, so do you. You're standing in the Hall of Records, and for once, you're not holding a goblet. You're holding a brush, a reed stylus to be precise, fine-tipped, delicate, a tool more feared than a sword in these halls. Because today, someone is offering you the one thing that might outlive even Pharaoh. A name, your name, etched in ink, on limestone, immortality, more or less. It starts when a scribe named Thuti finds you near the temple kitchens. You're balancing a tray of honey wine and dodging a poet who smells like boiled garlic. And Thuti, eyes squinty from too many hours bent over scrolls, calls you over. I hear you survived the tomb night. You nod. You've stopped explaining it. People either look at you like you're sacred or like you're cursed. Occasionally both. Thuti leans in. I'm inscribing the new dedication tablet, the one for the priest's quarter renovation. There's room for names, quiet names, small ones. Your heart skips. Servants don't usually get written into stone. Names are for nobles, priests, generals, people with bloodlines and land. But sometimes a scribe squeezes in a few others, a helper, a witness, a favoured cupbearer. There's a cost, of course. He wants a favour. You agree before hearing what it is. Later, you regret that. He wants access to the wine inventory, not the regular stuff, the festival jars, the ones with markings that say, for divine use only. You try to say no. You really do. He just smiles. Your name, carved, next to the stars. You cave. It's a small thing, a list, a count. You don't give him any wine, just let him see what's where. He notes it down, nods, thanks you. 2 days later, you hear the head wine steward screaming. A jar is missing. You say nothing. You wait. Then, one evening, Thuti leaves you a scrap of papyrus with a single word. Done. You visit the Hall of Records after midnight, quietly, with an excuse about delivering priestly wine. The scribe on duty is asleep. You tiptoe. There it is. Your name. Tiny. Curved. Right under. Assisted the purification of outer sanctum. It's you. Preserved. Etched. Proof that you existed. You want to laugh or cry or dance like that one noble who got too much date wine last month and tried to marry a pillar. But you don't. You just stare, because now the gods know you. Maybe not all of them, but one, the kind that watches quiet hands and steady feet. Still, your secret eats at you. You didn't steal the wine, but you opened the door to it. You don't know what Thuti needed it for. Bribery, blackmail, or worse, poetry. You avoid the Hall of Records for a while. You clean goblets. You assist with another crocodile blessing ceremony, which ends with the high priest slipping on a fish and declaring a new holiday. You keep your distance, but the whisper follows you. Immortal, marked. You're the one in the stone. Servants start sitting nearer to you at meals. Some ask questions, others say nothing, but their glances linger. Even Bebi starts looking at you with a new expression, something between curiosity and suspicion. One night, another cupbearer leans in as you clean the ceremonial trays. Is it true, he whispers. You cheated the death ritual, and now your name's been carved into the god's hallway. You almost deny it, then pause, and just shrug. Mystery is safer than truth. Still, paranoia grows. You double-check every goblet, every scroll, every time someone says your name. You wonder, was it worth it? Historians still debate the purpose of ghost names in temple records. Those tiny inscriptions with no title, no lineage, just a name and a role. Some say they were servants honoured for loyalty. Others believe they were scapegoats in disguise, names carved so a blame could fall somewhere when things went wrong. You pray you're the first kind. You also pray no one notices. Thuti now has a slightly shinier belt and a smug grin that could be seen from Karnak. You keep your head down, but it's hard, because once you've seen your name in stone, you want more, a bigger name, a longer line. Maybe next time you'll be mentioned in a hymn. Maybe. That night you dream of a wall, blank and smooth. You press your hand to it, and it begins to remember you. You're not on duty today, at least not officially, which means you should be resting or trimming the threads off your backup kilt or teaching Ferment not to chase the ibis again. But no, you're being dragged by two guards, politely but firmly, toward the royal bath courtyard. His Radiance requests your presence, says one. Is it about wine? You ask. They don't answer, which is how you end up standing, tray in hand, next to a steaming pool flanked by ferns and decorative frogs made of lapis. Pharaoh is floating. Yes, floating. His arms spread like a sun god doing a trust exercise with water. Beside him, on a little golden bench, sits a crocodile. Not a carving, not a statue, an actual crocodile, breathing, blinking, wearing, somehow, a little golden collar. This, Pharaoh says, is Nepi. You resist the urge to scream. Nepi is not restrained. Nepi is not behind a barrier. Nepi is just there, floating, looking directly at you with eyes that say, I might eat your liver, or I might nap. Toss a coin. Pharaoh gestures. Paul. You step forward, hands shaking like a tambourine in an earthquake. You uncork the wine, frankincense infused, special for bath rituals, and pour carefully into the cup resting on a reed mat at the pool's edge. Nepi watches. Pharaoh smiles. He prefers it at room temperature. You nod. You are now taking sommelier notes for a crocodile. The bath continues. Servants scrub Pharaoh's feet. Musicians play softly. A priest chants something about divine rebirth while aggressively waving incense. You stay perfectly still, wondering if the crocodile can smell fear. Then Nepi slides into the water. You flinch, just a little, enough for your cup to slosh slightly. A few drops fall. They hit the edge of the pool. Nepi turns. You freeze. The crocodile swims towards you, slow and deliberate. You step back, involuntarily. Pharaoh laughs, a sharp, sudden sound. Nepi likes you, he says. That doesn't help. Nepi stops at the pool's edge, blinks once, opens his mouth just enough to show teeth that could politely turn you into soup, then, mercifully, turns away and swims to the other side. You exhale so hard you go light-headed. Later, in the courtyard shade, you sit shaking behind a potted fig tree. A passing attendant hands you a honey date. You survived, he whispers. Most people don't meet Nepi up close and live to talk about it, especially not with both arms still attached. You chew slowly, still staring at the rippling pool. You learn that Nepi is Pharaoh's pet, or perhaps his divine companion, or possibly a cursed general reincarnated as a carnivore with mood swings. Historians still argue whether royal crocodiles were symbolic guardians, or just extravagant warnings about what happens if you misstep. Either way, Nepi is not the only problem today. Because later, during wine service for the evening procession, one of the side doors to the temple corridor bursts open. A servant stumbles through, covered in wet scrolls, shouting something about the record tablets being tampered with. You drop the goblet. It doesn't break, but it splashes, just enough to catch the vizier's robe. Everyone freezes. The vizier stares down at the stain. He looks up at you. His expression is calm, too calm. Careless, he murmurs. You bow so low your nose almost smudges the floor. You are dismissed. But that night, you find a piece of folded papyrus under your mat. 2 words. Watch Nepi. You don't sleep. The next day, while polishing Pharaoh's ceremonial cup, you spot Thuti speaking quietly to a priest with a crooked spine. They part as you approach, nodding too quickly. Later, one of the junior scribes whispers, "Something's wrong in the Hall of Records." The priest's name disappeared from the renovation tablet. Yours is still there, though. That's not comforting. You decide to lay low. For 3 days you serve in silence. You avoid the records hall, the crocodile bath, and any room with more than one scribe. But the palace has a way of dragging you back into the center. You're summoned again, this time for a private ceremony at the garden shrine. You bring wine. You bring the polished goblet. You bring your absolute most expressionless expression. Pharaoh waits beside Nepi, who is now wearing a different collar. This one has an ankh charm dangling from it. "We're celebrating loyalty," Pharaoh says. You nod. He drinks. So does Nepi. From a low stone bowl. Wine, diluted, sacred. You say nothing. Pharaoh studies you for a long moment. "Do you believe in signs?" he asks. You say what you're supposed to. "Only those sent by the gods and their representative." He smiles. "Good answer." You're dismissed again. As you walk away, Nepi hisses, softly, like a warning. That night, someone bangs on the servant doors. A cupbearer has gone missing. You don't ask who. You already know. Palace life continues. But now, everyone walks a little more carefully. Even the crocodile. Pharaoh is dead. Not today, not 5 minutes ago, but recently enough that the palace still smells like myrrh, and no one makes eye contact longer than a heartbeat. You wake to drums, not the ceremonial kind, not the festival kind, the other kind, the kind that call priests and mask grief with thunder. They say it was peaceful. In his sleep, surrounded by loyal guards and high-ranking priests who all swear nothing was suspicious. Which is exactly what you'd say if something was suspicious. You sit up, dizzy with dread. Not grief. Not yet. Dread always comes first. Because when a god dies, everything shifts. The walls bend. The air tightens. Your place, your little corner of the divine machinery, might not exist by sunset. You're summoned to the hall of purification. Again, you dress quickly, neutral linen, no jewelry, no expression. You don't ask questions. The guards escort you silently. Even ferment doesn't follow. Somehow, he knows this is not a bring your dog kind of day. Inside the hall, the priests are gathered like vultures disguised as men. They chant softly, pacing in circles. At the center lies Pharaoh's body, wrapped, painted, surrounded by canopic jars and offerings. The goblet you once carried for him sits beside his right hand, untouched. You bow. You are told to pour, not into his hand, not into a cup, onto the floor. The wine hits the stone and disappears into the cracks. Symbolic nourishment for his journey beyond. You step back, eyes down. Your pulse is somewhere near your throat. No one looks at you. No one has to. You are part of this machine, but for how much longer? Because with death comes succession, and succession means danger. The new Pharaoh is not a stranger. You've seen him in feasts, standing in corners observing quietly. Sharp eyes, sharper smile. They say he trained with priests. Others say he trained with assassins. You do not plan to find out which is true. You go about your duties. You clean the goblets. You assist the feast preparation. Yes, there's already a feast. There's always a feast. even when half the palace is still officially in mourning. You're reassigned, not fired, not dismissed, but moved away from wine, away from the royal scalp. You're now cupbearer of incense and offerings, which is a fancy way of saying go stand near altars and don't spill anything flammable. You take the demotion with a bow, but you notice who wasn't reassigned. Thuti the scribe, gone, just gone. The crooked-spined priest, missing. Baby, retired early, or so they say. You serve at the Temple of Stars now, where the new Pharaoh goes to commune with cosmic will. You pour wine onto glowing coals. You whisper invocations. You wear a new tunic dyed blue to match the ceiling. One evening, the new Pharaoh arrives. He doesn't speak, just watches, then steps forward. You pour. He lifts the cup, sniffs, pauses, then drinks. He does not smile. He simply nods. That's it. That's your moment of survival. Historians still debate what happened during this transitional period. If servants were purged, if the priesthood was reorganized, if the palace itself reshuffled its bones like a snake shedding old skin. You live it. You know the truth. It was a purge, just not one with swords. Silence was the blade, absence the blood. One day, a junior priest bows to you and whispers, "Your name is still in the stone." You nod. A few nights later, a girl from the linens division passes you a wrapped date and says, "My brother heard you once served wine to death itself." You don't correct her. Why would you? You now live in echoes. Your movements are cautious. Your tasks are simple. You speak less. But occasionally, just occasionally, you visit the outer garden where Pharaoh's tomb lies under a slab of carved basalt. You kneel. You offer a few drops of wine to the dust, and you remember. You remember the cups, the golden halls, the conspiracies and crocodiles and eyeliner disasters, the nights of no sleep, the scent of lotus, the echo of laughter that made you think just once you might be more than invisible. You were a servant. You were a witness. You were a survivor. And in one sacred corner of one sacred wall, your name remains. Small, curved, unmoving, immortal. And now, as the halls of the palace grow quiet and the incense fades into the stones, you step away, slowly, lightly. The heavy gold, the polished floors, the whispering priests, those all stay behind. You walk barefoot across soft earth again, like you did long ago. The Nile hums nearby, low and gentle, like a lullaby it's sung since the world was young. The torchlight dims. Your linen tunic is loose and cool again. The summer heat now just a memory tucked behind your ribs. Ferment snoozes beside your mat, his tail twitching to a dream you'll never quite know. You hear the wind in the reeds, the creak of a wooden cart far off, a voice laughing in the distance. And none of it matters anymore. Not the politics, not the cups, not even the gods. What matters is this stillness, this moment of breath, the simple miracle of your chest rising and falling soft as feathers, steady as the river. You are safe, you are home, and though your name is carved in stone, you are more than history now. You are at rest, so let your body sink, let your thoughts drift, let the palace fade behind your eyelids, gold turning to dream dust. You've served enough for 10 lifetimes. Sleep now. The gods will keep watch a while. You wake to birdsong, not barking, a gentle clatter of clay jugs, not marching sandals, no trumpets, no incense drills, no urgent whisper about a missing priest or an accidental fig heist. It's peaceful, suspiciously peaceful. You sit up slowly on your mat, surprised by how quiet your joints are. Ferments curled at your feet, nose twitching, paws kicking at phantom ducks in his sleep. The servant quarters are calm. No one's yelling, no one's crying. Bebby hasn't materialized to accuse you of breathing too irregularly near ceremonial trays. And best of all, you're not on the schedule. Not for wine, not for goblets, not even for backup incense support. You are optional. A quiet season has arrived. Not because the palace has gone still. Oh no, there's always a god to worship, a harvest to bless, a noble to pamper, but because for once you are not in the middle of it. They've reassigned you to soft tasks. You now tend incense burners in lesser courtyards. You sweep temple floors after evening rites. You light lamps that flicker gently in alcoves no one visits until sundown. It is, in short, the kind of work no one notices until it doesn't happen, and that's the beauty of it. You disappear in plain sight. You spend your mornings trimming reed wicks, polishing tiny copper oil dishes, and arranging incense cones by fragrance. Frankincense for rites, myrrh for mourning, kai-fi for calming. The priests trust you now, not with politics, but with peace. One of them, the kind who always smells faintly of citrus and has a mole shaped like a cat, hands you a fresh box of sandalwood and says simply, "Do it right." You do. Your afternoons drift like smoke. You move slowly, purposefully. No urgency, no hovering nobles, and no nepi. Thank all the gods. Occasionally, you catch glimpses of the new Pharaoh, always from a distance, always flanked by guards who look like they could strangle a man with a prayer scroll. He walks like someone born into silence. He hasn't summoned you once, which honestly is thrilling, because the truth is, you're tired. Not just from years of bowing and carrying and smiling through clenched ribs. You're tired in your bones. The kind of tired that lives behind your knees and in the corners of your dreams. This season, this quiet, is a gift. You begin tending the garden shrine in the southern courtyard, a small place ringed with figs and herbs, with one cracked statue of Hathor smiling as though she knows all your secrets. You water the papyrus plants. You leave fresh offerings, wine-soaked dates, crushed lotus petals, whispers you never speak aloud. You don't see many people here, just an elderly record keeper who walks with a cane that squeaks, and a servant girl who sings softly while trimming basil. You nod to both. Neither ask your name. Perfect. Some days you carry incense bowls to the lesser tombs, the ones beneath the priest dormitories carved into old limestone, rarely visited unless someone important used to live there. You light candles, you whisper prayers, you pause at one small doorway with no name and leave a single sprig of mint. You don't know why, but it feels right. Historians don't argue about this part. They rarely mention it at all, because what happens after survival, after the goblets and conspiracies and eyeliner wars, doesn't make for dramatic scrolls. But it matters, because the palace doesn't run on drama. It runs on rhythm. And now, finally, your rhythm is gentle. Evenings bring soft duties, filling lamps, folding ceremonial linens, placing offerings just so. You eat figs without fear of a priest accusing you of sacrilege. You sleep without flinching, and every now and then you sit on a stone bench near the wine store and watch the sky burn orange. Sometimes ferment joins you, sometimes not. You don't mind either way. You don't speak much anymore, not because you're hiding, but because you've said enough. Enough for a lifetime, enough to fill a scroll or two, or 15. You've had enough of gold, of sharp smiles and sharper sandals, of rituals you don't understand, and glances that last too long. Now, you light incense. You breathe. You live softly. And in the quiet folds of a palace that once almost chewed you up, you begin, at last, to exhale. It's tucked behind a linen shelf. You find it by accident. Well, sort of. You're delivering a basket of crushed rose petals to the attendants in charge of funerary fragrance, when your elbow catches the edge of a dusty reed box half buried in the storeroom. You hear the soft thunk, then a clatter of wood, and when you crouch down to fix your mistake, you see it. A goblet. But not just any goblet. The goblet, your first. The ceremonial one with the nick on the rim from where that noble sneezed mid-toast. The one you held with trembling hands during your first temple feast. The one Pharaoh once raised without looking, and you somehow placed perfectly into his grasp. You would have been praised if Bebby hadn't followed it with, "Don't let it go to your head, lad." You still spill like a fish in a basket. You lift it gently, dust trailing off like forgotten breath. It's lighter than you remember. Or maybe you're just heavier now, in all the quiet ways no one sees. It's chipped, faded. But your fingerprints, your past, your panic, they're still in the shape of it. You sit for a moment, in a linen storeroom, surrounded by folded silence and the scent of dried herbs, holding a piece of yourself. Later that day, you ask one of the younger scribes what happens to old ceremonial objects. Most are stored, blessed, then forgotten, he shrugs, unless a god asks for them back. You nod. You do not tell him the god already had it. You keep the goblet with you for a day, just tucked in your sash, a little secret weight against your hip, not because you're stealing it, just borrowing your own memory. You think back to your first day, your first sniff test, the taste of wine and dust and mortal fear. You remember when you first learned not to flinch. You think of Pharaoh's nod, of Nepi's hiss, of the sacred spoon, of the tomb, of Thuti and the papyrus with your name, of the scribe who asked for your help in exchange for a moment carved into time, of the friends whose names aren't written. You find yourself sitting beneath the fig tree in the outer courtyard again, the one with the shady patch just big enough for you and Ferment, who now has his own daily patrol route like he's been promoted to Royal Garden security. You place the goblet beside you, and you start talking, not loud, just enough. You tell the goblet about the time you caught a falling jug with your foot, about the feast where a noble wore so many necklaces he couldn't bow, about the day you were handed the ceremonial wine ladle and forgot which way was holy stir. You laugh softly, just enough. Then you carry the goblet back, not to the shelf, but to the offering basin in the garden of rest. You rinse it, pour a little wine inside, offer it up to the empty air. You whisper, "You did well," and you leave it there, because some things don't belong to you anymore. They belong to the story. Historians still argue whether palace servants ever left personal marks on the tools of ritual. Some say they were interchangeable, nameless hands in linen. Others say the tools remembered, that they absorbed the stories, the panic, the joy, the whispered jokes no one else heard. You don't need to argue, you know. As you walk back to your quarters, a young cupbearer in training stumbles past, eyes wide, sandals askew. He's holding a tray like it's made of flaming cobras. You help him steady it, just lightly. A hand on his shoulder, you nod. "You'll be fine," you say. He stares. "Were you him, the one from the tomb?" You smile, just a little. "I was a lot of things, and then you're gone, back into your rhythm, your incense, your quiet. But the goblet remains, waiting, listening, remembering." The new boy follows you like a shadow with sandals too loud. He tries to be quiet. He really does. But he's got that energy, the one that says, "I want to do well, but I'm about to trip over this sacred mat and make a scene so loud the gods file a noise complaint." You've been assigned to train him, Not officially, of course. No one writes that down. It's more of a gesture, a gentle nod from a steward, a folded linen robe laid out beside yours, a cup placed too close to your station, by accident. You say nothing, at first. You just let him fumble. Watch him try to figure out which side of the ceremonial tray faces Pharaoh. Hint, the side with the falcon always points outward. You don't laugh when he nearly pours the temple wine into the incense bowl. You just blink slowly, hand him the right cup, and keep walking. Eventually, he speaks. "What's your name?" You pause. It's been so long since someone asked. "Just a servant," you say. He frowns. "But I heard there's a wall with names, and yours is on it." You pretend to adjust the wine cloth. "There are lots of walls," you murmur. Don't believe everything scribes whisper. But you see it now. His eyes. He's heard the stories. Not the real ones. The polished ones. About a cupbearer who walked with the dead, who served Pharaoh at his last feast, who fed wine to a crocodile and lived. A story, not a person. You, but not you. You take him to the outer courtyard, the quiet one. The fig tree hums with bees, and the fountain sings its cracked, contented trickle. You hand him an old practice goblet, worn, simple, copper. "Hold this," you say. He does. "Now imagine everything going wrong at once." He swallows hard. Your robe rips. The cup wobbles. The priest next to you sneezes so hard he knocks over the incense burner. Pharaoh's watching. The vizier's already frowning. A noble is asking where the olives are. The cat has decided your foot is her pillow. The boy blinks. "You keep your hands steady," you say. "That's the job." He nods, slowly, like someone realizing this wasn't about grapes at all. Later, he walks beside you during afternoon incense. You notice his gait is more measured. He still looks terrified, but his hands are still. Progress. That evening, you pass him in the kitchen corridor. He's cleaning a tray with the dedication of a monk. You stop, glance at the work, then nod once. "Your posture's improving," you say. He beams. You can see it, even in the torchlight. That night, you visit the Hall of Records again. Not to look at your name, not even to check if it's still there. You sit in the corner, behind a pillar carved with stars, and listen. Scribes trade tales. They speak of the new cupbearer, clumsy, eager, but sharp-eyed, quick to learn, and they say in passing, he trains under him, the one who saw Pharaoh into the afterlife. One of them says, "What's his name?" There's a pause. "I forget," the first says, "but the wine always reaches the altar." You smile. Historians still argue whether palace servants mentored their successors, or if each generation started fresh, drowning in the same lessons. But you know this much, a steady hand isn't taught, it's shared. The next morning, the boy is already awake before you. He's waiting near the basin, adjusting his sash. He sees you and straightens. "Should I carry the goblet today?" You shake your head. "Not yet." Then pause. "Soon." And for the first time in a long while, you hear your name again. Software, almost reverent. "Thank you, Keeper." You flinch slightly. It's been years since someone said it out loud. You nod once, and the day begins. You wake to a blank slate. No summons, no shifts, no ceremony, no feast. No scribe slipping notes under your mat or steward raising an eyebrow that says, "Brace yourself." You blink up at the ceiling of the servant quarters, still dappled with smoke marks and old sandal scuffs, and wait for the call that doesn't come. You're unassigned. Not demoted, not forgotten, just unclaimed by the day. You stretch slowly, unsure whether to be grateful or deeply suspicious. Ferment lets out a soft grunt from your feet and flops over with the theatrical weight of someone who has never lifted a goblet in his life. You scratch behind his ears, then rise with no plan except to follow wherever the morning wanders. You walk the palace as a guest in your own skin. The halls feel different when you're not racing against protocol. The murals seem to move slower. The columns curve with more generosity. You notice a carving you've passed 1,000 times. A servant holding a platter, face calm but eyes wide. You wonder if the artist was trying to capture reverence or fear. You make your way to the fig tree, your fig tree, though no one's ever called it that. You've earned it, sat beneath it on days of triumph and terror, of silence and sweat. It leans in toward the fountain as if listening to its burbling gossip. You sit on the bench with your arms crossed and let the breeze do the talking. A rare quiet fills your chest. Not numb, not sleepy, just complete. Soon the usual rhythms of the palace start up. Footsteps echo. Priests recite morning offerings. Guards argue over who forgot to oil their sandals. But none of them are yours to chase. You watch them pass like boats on a distant river. And for once, you don't feel left behind. You walk past the kitchens. No one calls for you. A novice baker waves politely as you pass, her hands coated in flour and wild hope. You return the wave with just enough smile to keep it sacred. You circle back toward the record hall, not to visit your name, not even to check if it's been moved or overwritten, just to pass through. The breeze catches a scrap of discarded papyrus and twirls it in front of your feet. You catch it. A recipe for ceremonial date wine. Nothing special, but the handwriting is precise. It reminds you of Thuti. You fold it and tuck it away. Maybe one day you'll make it, offer it to a quiet god, or just sip it in the garden and toast to no one. By afternoon, you find yourself near the west wall, the part of the palace with fewer murals, fewer visitors. The plaster is faded. A line of ants marches up the base. You sit there too. Why not? You watch the sun pull shadows across the floor. And for the first time in forever, no one needs you. It feels strange. It feels like breathing. You think about the goblet, the one you return to the offering basin. You wonder if anyone's picked it up, if it's still there, gathering dew and echoes. You hope so. You like the idea of something sacred resting, like you are now. Even Ferment seems to sense it. He finds you before sunset, flops beside you, and lets out a groan so dramatic you briefly consider checking him for injuries. You both sit like that for a while. Two retired veterans of service, one with an itchy kilt, the other with fleas. You don't speak. You just listen. To the breeze, to the birds, to the old walls that creak with stories no one's told in years. Historians don't mention these days, these blank, quiet, invisible days, the ones where nothing dramatic happens, no poison, no politics, no prophecy, but you think they're the most sacred of all, because not every story is about rising, some are about resting. The palace doesn't remember everyone. That's just the way of it. For every scribe with a statue and every priest with a tomb taller than your village, there are 100 hands that once carried torches, folded robes, poured wine, and vanished into dust. But sometimes a name survives in whispers. You're sitting beneath the fig tree again. Evening, just before the stars wake up. The courtyard hums with gentle sounds, sandals brushing stone, soft water in the fountain, Ferment snoring through his snout like a tiny reed flute. You're not on duty. You're not waiting for anything. You're simply here. And that's when you hear it. A group of new trainees, sitting nearby, whispering the way young servants always do when they think no one important is listening. They say he served wine at Pharaoh's last feast, one says. Yeah, and survived a crocodile with royal clearance, says another. And the tomb ritual, the real one, not the temple mock-ups. He went inside and came back. Changed. You don't turn. You don't interrupt. You just breathe. He trained someone, a third voice adds. That one cupbearer, the serious one, the one who never drops anything. They all nod. And then, what was his name? A pause. Someone hesitates. I think it started with a key. They fumble, shrug. Anyway, one concludes. They say his name is still carved in the hall. Quiet, but real. You rise slowly, not to leave, just to move, to wander. You walk the outer edge of the garden shrine, tracing the old stone with your fingers. The moon is climbing now, silver and slow. The fig tree rustles behind you. You remember the first time you entered this palace. Dusty feet, terrified heart, unsure of where to look. You think of the goblets, the feasts, the screams you swallowed and the laughter you never dared to show. The tomb, the whisper of conspiracies, the weight of secrets in wine. And then you think of now, a name passed from lips to lips, imperfect but preserved, a tale traded like a sacred coin worn at the edges. You look up, the stars are familiar now. They do not blink with judgment, they just keep watch. And beneath them, you return to your mat. You settle beside Ferment, who barely stirs. You lay back, arms folded behind your head, staring up at constellations carved by gods with very theatrical taste. Historians will never find you in scrolls, but you exist, in rituals, in routines, in the way a cup is turned just slightly before it's passed, in the way a servant waits 3 breaths before bowing. You live in shadows, not for fear but for care. You were never the point of the story, but you held it together. And now it's time to let it go. Let the stars finish your line. Let your breath soften. Let your name slip gently into legend, where no one can mispronounce it anymore. You smile, the final kind, the kind no one sees, and sleep takes you, softly, completely.